Hello there, welcome back to the Closet Historian and back to my sewing room where today I'm going to be teaching you how to make your own block pattern. I get this question all the time. How do I get a block pattern? Can you show how to make block patterns, even though I've done a couple of videos before that'll be in cards here today? Or can you make block patterns to sell? Like, a lot of people want me to have my own sloper to sell, and it would be very easy for me to kind of cash in, stamp my, the Closet Historian on a sloper pattern and mark it up and sell it. It would be very expensive actually for me to put that together, and it would be therefore very expensive for me to sell it to you. And it just seems silly when a sloper pattern is a sloper pattern is a sloper pattern, and they are already commercially available. Just because my name isn't on them doesn't mean they won't work for you. So that's right, today we're going to be going over how to take a commercial fitting shell pattern, which is basically just a sloper, just like as if you drafted one from measurements, like I've shown here on the channel. You can draft sloper patterns, block patterns from measurements using pattern drafting instructions, or you can just buy one ready-made, which is what these fitting shells are. So today I'm going to take the Vogue fitting shell from Vogue Patterns here, and I'm going to cut it out and go through the many steps of fitting it to my body into making it a working block that would work for me. Of course, I already have my blocks that you see me use here all the time, and it did take me 7 muslins to perfect that block, so I'm looking forward to this process today. Hopefully it won't take quite that many this time, but we'll see. Basically, anytime you take a sloper pattern, whether you draft it from measurements or you buy a commercial one, you're going to have to fit it to your own body. Every individual has different fit adjustments that will be required. So today, you'll only be seeing the fit things that I need, honestly. And those are the only kind of fit problems I've ever run into because I've only ever dressed this one body. But hopefully, at least, it will be a little bit illuminating about how I would go about this process myself and how you can use a fitting shell like this to make a block pattern for your sewing room as well. So let's go ahead and jump on over to the blue patterning table of doom, and I will show you how I would get started. All right, here we are above the table with our Vogue 1004, I believe is the number on this one, in a size 18, which is for a, let me just check, for a 40 bust, a 32 waist, and a 42 hip, which is not perfect for me, but is in the ballpark. I'm kind of between sizes 16, 18, and 20 on this pattern myself, so I just kind of chose the middle one, and you'll see that there's a lot of extra ease built into this pattern to accommodate like a human as opposed to a standard, so it won't be any problem that this is a little small in the bust and hip for me, and a little bit big in the waist. I kind of just chose a middle ground here. So this is a size 18 of the Vogue pattern, and I will go ahead and cut out the D cup bodice front here. This does come with A through D. Of course, personally, I am a 36 double D, so I will have to do something about that because this is only going up to a D cup here with this one pattern. However, this pattern, they do make I think the Butterick version, they do have a plus size version of this very similar pattern. Again, Butterick, McCall's, and Vogue are all owned by the same company, and I would be shocked if their sloper wasn't quite similar. So I assume that the Butterick version of this and the plus size version of the Butterick pattern isn't that different, and they may have larger cup sizes in the plus size, I'm not sure. I didn't buy one to check because I'm cheap, that's right. But here I am cutting out the skirt pattern as well. I'm not going to go over how to fit the skirt pattern specifically today, just because the bodice is the hardest part to fit of a sloper anyway, and you would just use the same kind of idea and principles that I'm going to show you for the bodice to fit the skirt as well, except for it just will be easier because mostly you're just fitting the side seams and then figuring out to make sure the darts will work. And again, there are instructions in a pattern like this for how to do the fit and everything, but I'm just going to ignore most of their instructions and fit the bodice my way, and you will hopefully get an idea about how to fit the skirt and sleeve from seeing me do the bodice, aka the hard part. Because of course, the bodice you have to most fit around, let's say, working around the bust, you know? But I can fold the rest of this pattern away, the other cup sizes and stuff, and put it away in the envelope for future if I ever need to make a sloper for somebody else, perhaps, which I really do need to do because I need to make a dress for my mom, so I need to make a sloper for her soon. And her shape is actually quite different from mine. We have similar, not too different measurements-wise, but she's a completely different shape person than me because clearly my DNA, half from my dad has made me into the hourglass that I am. But I will go ahead, and now that I've roughly cut these out, and go ahead and cut them out nicely along the given lines here. And then I actually do see, you can see here a piece of alphanumeric paper on the left, and that is because I'm going to trace these tissue paper patterns onto alphanumeric paper as well, just because this tissue paper is so fragile, and I'm rough on things. So the odds of me ripping this are just too high. So I'm going to transfer all of these, well, not all of these markings, but most of these markings from these pieces onto tracings out of alphanumeric paper. You could always use the back side of wrapping paper, I always recommend for this. Or you can use newsprint, although it's going to be very confusing with all that nonsense going on. So I do recommend a plain paper. But like butcher paper, wrapping paper, you can get like craft paper sometimes at like school supply places. You can get like plain large rolls of craft paper. It's another good option for something like this. Or just tissue paper if you have that around too. But I'm too rough to be dealing with tissue paper all the time. But here I am just cutting everything out, and I will go ahead and take these on over to the ironing board and actually give them a quick press. Oh, here the sleeve pattern started ripping apart on me, so I taped it back together. But I'm going to give these a quick press over on the ironing board as well, just so I can have nice flat versions of them. Alright, so now that these are nice and smooth, I can go ahead and trace them in the alphanumeric. And then you can see here how many pages of instructions this pattern comes with. I was pleasantly surprised with how much information they give. So here's, how to take your own measurements and like pre-adjust the pattern to fit you a little bit better before you even start cutting anything out. Then it shows you how to adjust the lengths and the widths for the pattern pieces. Then it shows you to cut, or tells you to cut out your first muslin and then start fitting from there. And then it has all these diagrams on several pages here showing all the different fit issues you may run into, like what the fit issue looks like and what the fix you need looks like. And I was pleasantly surprised to see so much of this information in here. So they show you the problem and the fix for lots of different common fit issues. Usually I recommend Googling that kind of thing. And of course, you're not going to have every fit issue here. So there may be things you run into that you need that are not in this Vogue instruction booklet, but that's when you start Googling like weird wrinkle next to arm sloper pattern, and you will find lots of forum posts and blog posts that should be able to help you any fit issues in addition to the ones that they have listed here in this Vogue pattern instruction booklet. But for now, I'm going to, of course, ignore their instructions and just use their pattern the way I want to. So here I am tracing the front into alphanumeric, and again, you can see here that they have a lot of extra ease built into this pattern. So if you look on the left-hand side where I'm tracing right now, there's this 2-inch dotted line on the interior of the pattern. That's kind of the actual size 18, and then they have this 2-inch barrier extending from that. So like if you needed more room, you have it here. And then up here at the shoulder line, you can see there's about 5/8 or an inch maybe of extra space up along the shoulder. Then this pattern piece in general has 5/8 seam allowance, and I always use 1/2 inch seam allowance instead. It's just how I was trained in fashion school to use 1/2 inch, and that's what I do. So I will cut off that additional little bit, 1/8 of an inch off of this pattern piece as well. Here you'll see I mark it in red, but I will go ahead and transfer over their apex and the dart markings as well. And then also I will dot in that line for the 2-inch difference. So I'm going to draw that onto this pattern as well. I will also draw the lines that they have included for lengthening or shortening. I draw them onto this version, but I don't actually end up using them. But I just thought I would transfer over as much of their markings as I could, just because I wanted a stronger paper version of this exact right out of the package pattern. I haven't modified anything yet. I'm just tracing a copy slightly off camera, but you get the idea. I'm not doing anything fancy yet. They also have an inch along the waistline, so you can see I'm sketching that in as well. They have just extra space along the shoulder, side seam, and waistline. And then I'm giving myself some good seam allowance here in the center front because I'm going to cut the center back of the pattern on the fold to be able to fit it to myself and then pin it down the center front. So I'm giving myself some extra room down the center front as well. But here's an exact copy of this Vogue pattern. And I'm going to go ahead and have to do a full bust adjustment to this because I know that this is a D cup pattern and I am a double D person. So if I will hold up my pattern, my actual block pattern. This one is from, it says 2019 on here, but it's actually from 2017. So it's a very old pattern technically. I'm still using it, even though my body, of course, has shifted a little bit over the years. But you can see what this looks like compared to their Vogue pattern. Things are very different, including this armhole, but this will shift up a little bit more when I transform it from a D to a double D. So let's go ahead and do that before we do anything else, because I always know that I need a full bust adjustment. It's just part of what I know about fitting things for me. So set this aside again. Of course, you won't have a finished block pattern that you like to reference to. So I am kind of cheating by referencing it here. You won't have anything like that, but I will be not using it to inform my decisions as much while correcting this. I'm just using it to see how far or how close I'm getting to actually a working block for me. All right, I will cut out and trace the back as well. so we can have both pieces ready to go, and then I'll do that full bust adjustment. All right, so here we are. We have our front and our back sitting next to it, ready to go. So again, this armhole gets really strange and acute, almost like it turns really in on itself quite a lot. It's not like a nice, I guess, gentle curve like a lot of block patterns you will see. Mine is much more of an acute curve or rounded curve, and that is because of the full bust adjustment. And to do that, I'm going to go ahead and draw a line parallel with the center front through the dart and the apex, the waist dart and the apex. Then I will draw from the apex through the side dart as well. And then I will draw a line about from the dart point out to the center front, which I don't end up using, but I'll tell you why you need it in a minute. But then you draw a line up into the first third of the arm side and again into the apex here. And so I will show you how we are going to add in another cup size to this. So using our scissors, we are cutting up the center line through the apex and then along this angled line up into the top third of the arm side, like so. And then we're going to cut again from the side dart leg to the apex as well. Then I'll tape down some paper underneath this, and I'll show you where we're adding in a little bit of additional fullness. So right here, I'm going to tape this pattern back down, and we're going to add in a 1/2 inch along this waist dart center portion here. And how did I arrive upon a 1/2 inch? Basically, the first time I ever did this, I tried 1 inch and it was too much. And so I dialed back to a 1/2 inch and that worked. So from then on, I've always used a 1/2 inch as a starting point. You might need less, you might need more. I will include a link to the blog post from an excellent resource called the Curvy Sewing Collective, which is how I learned to do full bust adjustments. And so I'll include their blog post for more information on what's happening here, why it needs to happen, doing it properly as opposed to quickly like I am doing here. But basically you just open up that 1/2 inch channel parallel with the center front down the center of the pattern here, and then the rest of the pattern has to open up a little bit to accommodate that. And so I'm just taping down paper in between all those areas. And now this pattern has additional cup fullness, I suppose. And I can go ahead and redraw my dart legs here in a moment as well. I'm just cutting off my extra paper before I do that. But yes, that Curvy Sewing Collective is a great resource, especially if you are curvy and you plan to be sewing. So check out a lot of their articles. They have a lot of good information over there. Again, how are we looking? Any closer to my actual pattern yet? A little bit. My darts are still bigger than this pattern's darts, especially the waist dart. So we'll see how that comes into play when we make this in muslin. But I'm not going to make any other additional changes to this yet. I'm just going to find that apex again. I kind of split it apart, so I'll just put it here in the middle, and we will finalize the apex once I try this on, basically. I'm just going to take a Sharpie here and redraw my dart legs, both from the apex and then 1.25 inches out from the apex, which is where I like them to be. The Vogue pattern has like the side dart 2 inches away, and then the other dart was like 5/8 of an inch away. Whatever. I always like my darts to be 1.25 inches away from the apex, so that is where we'll redraw them to. And that's just, again, a trial and error thing over the years. For my bust shape, my personal body shape, for the shape of bra that I wear, that is what I prefer for like my apex zone, I suppose. And again, another note about doing this is you want to, when you're fitting your blocks like this, do so over the undergarments that you plan on wearing. So I'm going to be fitting this muslin today over my Bali flower bra, which is the bra I wear most often. So that is why I want this to fit properly over that. And like vintage style bras create a very different shape to something like a modern foam cup rounded bra. So you want to be sure to wear the style of bra you intend to wear with your clothes, so that you are fitting over the correct silhouette, I suppose. But here on the back, I'm just again referencing my own block pattern to see how much is going to have to change here. Ooh, and clearly this pattern is much too like long-waisted for me. But we will discover how to fix that shortly. Because I wouldn't normally have this block pattern to reference, I'm going to go ahead and just cut this out of muslin, because that would be the next step I would have to take, were I not to have a nice reference to compare this to. So if I didn't know that this wasn't going to work, I would go ahead and try it. I mean, I would always know that it isn't going to work, because right out of the package, all I've done to modify this Vogue pattern so far is add that full bust adjustment in the front. That's the only modification I've made. The rest of this is still right off the tissue, just traced onto the paper. And again here I am cutting the center back piece along the fold of this cotton muslin here, just so that I can fit this down the front, as opposed to trying to pin it down the back. I mean, of course, fitting anything especially something as important as your sloper, it would be nice to have a sewing buddy with you to help you fit stuff. Or it would be easier to do this on another person perhaps. But of course, I don't have anyone to help me, and I assume many of you are also introverts and alone in the sewing room and don't have anyone to help you with your fit either. But I'm going to cut this out of some like medium weight, kind of standard weight muslin. This isn't like the super gauzy lightweight kind. It's a little bit stiffer, but I think that's useful because I use satines and kind of medium weight fabrics most of all. So how it fits in this muslin is going to be a pretty good indicator for how my garments will fit as well. So let me just cut this out, and then I will transfer all of the markings that I transferred onto the paper onto this muslin version as well. This is just going to be a version that I can actually wrap around myself as opposed to the paper, of course. And again, when I made my self-drafted blocks, which you have to do this same process with as well, no matter if you draft the sloper from measurements or have one drafted for you or use a standard pattern like this, no matter what, you're going to have to do the fitting process. If you have a sloper custom made for you, there are a couple of places online you can give them your measurements and they will draft a sloper custom for you. They should fit pretty well when they come back, but if you are using standardized measurements in any way and then fitting it to you, you're going to have to go through this fitting process. But again, yeah, when I did this back in 2017, the last time I did a full overhaul and made a block from scratch, it took me 7 versions of the pattern and muslins, 7 muslins mock-ups in between to perfect the fit to get it the way I liked. And I will show you a muslin version of my own block at the end of this video as well. So you can see how mine fits, or in some ways doesn't fit anymore. It does and it doesn't. It works for me still. But here again, I'm transferring the darts, including the shoulder dart here on the back from the Vogue pattern. This is exactly off the tissue, this back pattern here. And you can see their waist darts here on the back are very tall compared to mine. But again, this pattern is just too long for me anyway. But I'm again transferring on the 2-inch seam allowance at the side seams, the 1-inch here along the waist, just as a indicator for myself so that I know what the Vogue pattern is considering ease on this. And so I know where to pin it when I'm trying this on later. And then again, I'm going to transfer all that same stuff onto the fronts here. Again, most importantly, the center front line, because that's where I'm going to need to pin this closed on my body. And then, of course, our dart legs, the apex. Again, that 2 inches of seam allowance, the 1 inch of seam allowance up at the shoulder, the 1 inch down at the waist. All of the major indicators from this Vogue pattern I want to transfer onto the muslin as well, so I can see where those lines fall on my own body when I put this on. And I'm just using Crayola washable marker for this, and I do end up with a lot of washable marker all over my hands doing this, but again, it's washable, so it's not so bad. I'm just transferring everything down onto the muslin here in 1,000 times speed. Ooh, if only it were that fast. All right. Now, you could go ahead and sew these darts and sew the shoulder seams and side seams and stuff like that, but we don't need to be doing any sewing yet. Who knows if this pattern will work? This is the first try right out of the package. So we are going to go ahead and pin these darts closed and pin the side seams and shoulder seams. So that's right, I've just folded this dart along the line and I'm pinning it closed. Now, right now I'm pinching this with the fullness towards the side seam, so wrong. You'll watch me fix it in just a minute. But in general, you just pinch along the dart leg line there and just line it up with the other dart leg and then pin the dart closed. Instead of sewing it, we're just going to be pinning it for now. Because for all we know, we need to make this dart larger, this dart smaller. We're about to start fitting this. We don't need it to be sewn in place already, because who knows if this will be the final dart we need. We could need more pinched out of the back if you have like a hollow back, or if your back curves outward, you might need less. You know, human bodies are all different shapes, so the standard dart may not work. So let's just pin those in place for now. And then again, I will pin the shoulder dart as well. You will notice that my personal blocks do not have a shoulder dart. That's because at a certain point in this process, I just start ignoring that it exists, and that's always worked for me. You may need a shoulder dart. Again, maybe your shoulder is more or less rounded than mine, or than the quote-unquote standard here. So you may need a shoulder dart, you may not. I usually just kind of eliminate them, but only by ignoring them. You'll see what I mean. Then for the fronts here, again, I'm going to fold that fullness of the side dart down towards the waist and just pin that dart closed. Again, make sure you line these up quite precisely so that you can get a good idea of the fit, but not so precisely that we're going to start sewing anything yet, because for all we know, all this needs to change. That's basically what I'm trying to say. All right, so now that that's done, one side of this front, I went ahead and ironed the front along the center front so that I can pin this onto my body like so and close it up along the center front. But I have the back here, and I will layer the fronts on. And again, I'm just going to pin these side seams and shoulder seams shut. I'm not going to sew them at all. I'm just going to pin them. And this first time you're watching me here pin, I start pinning outside of the 2-inch indicator line that was indicated on the Vogue pattern. Hopefully you're following along. So I have drawn that line onto onto the muslin here as well. And I just pinned outside of that line to start with, but then again, that was much too large on me. And then I ended up pinning right along the 2-inch line, and you'll see how that fits. This again being the size 18, which should be a little bit both big and small on me. I think the size 18 was actually a really good choice on this, weirdly enough. A little bit, supposed to be a little bit small for me in the bust and hip, but no problem with as much seam allowance as they're giving us here with this full 2 inches on the sides. But the biggest problem with this pattern and me is that I am not as long as this pattern, I suppose. I'm not necessarily super short-waisted, I don't think. I would consider myself kind of average. I don't like run into that problem back when I would buy clothes. I didn't run into the problem of everything being long-waisted on me or anything. But I guess I'm on the edge of being short-waisted. So this pattern in particular is definitely too long for me. But you will see what happens when I start to put this onto my body momentarily. Let's try it on. Time for our first try on. And here I am wearing that exact muslin I was just showing you. So here I am, I have a marker because I want to be able to draw on the muslin anything I need to change. And you can see with it pinned along the 2-inch allowance that they give, along that 2 inches, it starts to fit quite well on the sides, but it needs to come up a lot. So I've literally just pulled the whole pattern up until the waist was at the correct level and everything else was at the correct level except for the shoulder. So just pulled everything up. And then of course, as usual, this always happens to me, I have to pin out this extra dart of fullness above the bust. This is more than we added in from the full bust adjustment. So this is just a separate kind of dart bit of fullness that I always need to take out of a sloper pattern. And so I have pinched that into a dart on one side and marked it so that I can go ahead and take that as a separate dart and swing it into either the waist or side dart here. Again, these darts are a little bit small, so I think I need to pinch out a little bit more. I could split that, I guess, needed adjustment from the to make the waist smaller. I need to split that into the side seams and the darts, and I actually end up taking too much of it into the darts for this muslin, so you'll see me make that kind of mistake here. But overall, it's not terrible here. The side seams are fitting pretty okay. It's just the shoulder that has so many problems. So again, I'm just going to draw on to the muslin with this marker to show myself where I actually need this shoulder seam to be and this neck stuff to be, because this is just a lot, too much nonsense going on up here. So I'm just going to directly draw on this and we'll make some adjustments to the pattern. My apex and the darts are actually sitting quite okay. And here I'm thinking this is a weird thing to be doing on camera. That's all right. But the apex is in an okay spot, so I'm not too worried about that. But the length here, as soon as I pulled everything else up, is also good too. I need about a ½ inch past my natural waistline, of course, because that ½ inch becomes seam allowance when the skirt is sewn onto this. So let's start making some adjustments now after this first muslin, version 1 here. All right, so I know I need to bring the front neckline down a little bit and adjust this shoulder seam quite a lot, including in the back here. So I've pinned everything where I want it to be while wearing this, and I'm just indicating that more to myself with marker before I take all these pins out so I can see what it needs to look like flat, because of course we need to go put this back on paper. I'm going to adjust this dart a little bit, add in a good ½ inch more to the dart, and then of course I need to take this separate little dart that I pinched out away as well. So I have drawn indicators in for that as well. And so I need to transfer all of these changes onto my pattern as well, but I don't want to modify this version 1 pattern. I want to trace this pattern and then modify that new copy. And I keep, as I do this kind of process, I keep each version because you may need to backtrack. So I like to keep version 1, trace that, and then make the modifications to create a version 2 pattern. Because if version 2 fits worse, then I want to be able to go back to version 1 and have an unmodified copy, basically. So while you're doing this, it's going to, again, take several versions to get the perfected fit. And if you make a change that turns out to be incorrect, you want to be able to go back to the previous version of the pattern. So always trace a new one. Again, this is the time where we're going to be going through a lot of paper and a lot of mock-up fabric. We are perfecting the sloper, the block pattern to use from now on. We want to go ahead and do our due diligence, create a new version of the paper pattern as much as possible, create a new version of the muslin as much as possible, especially early on in the process like this when we're only on like version 2. Once it gets down to like version 9 and 8 where like the small changes are extremely subtle, it's fine because you won't need to backtrack significantly. But up here at the start, I think it's just better to keep tracing another copy. That way, if something goes disastrously wrong, you're not like stuck without the best, like the last most recent copy. Me trying to always explaining myself into circles, trying to explain things as usual. So here's just another tracing of the same version 1 here. And now I will take my muslin and start using this to make the changes onto this new copy of the pattern. So I have about 6/8 of an inch here of extra dart to pinch out. I should have done a little bit onto the dart and a little bit onto the side seam, but I just put that all here in this front dart, and we'll see what that creates later. I should have split this fullness that needed to be removed from the dart and into the side seam, but we'll see that later. So this 2 inches worked quite well for me, so I'm just going to keep that and just lower the seam allowance down to 1/2 inch. Also, we had that extra dart up in here into the arm side, so I will go ahead and transfer those markings over onto the paper, and then we will take that dart out, which is going to cause some real strange things to happen to our arm side. So pay attention here to what nonsense is happening. Again, I'm just transferring over everything I drew onto this muslin while I was wearing it, transferring that over onto the paper pattern. Right here, I'm just piercing through the markings with a pin so I can have pin marks on my paper, and they're transferred over to exactly where I need them to be. Same up here with the shoulder, which is going to look very different in a moment here. My shoulders, I guess, are a lot less angled than the standard. I don't really know what that means, but that's all right. You know, bodies are all different and weird in their own ways, so. And I'm quite privileged and lucky that my body isn't that different than what they consider the standard, so I don't have wild issues with a pattern like this, which is nice. I'm lucky in that sense. So, but you can see the shoulder is so much shorter and strangely different angle than the one that we have from the suggested pattern here. But it is starting to line up with my own block a little bit better, so hopefully that means I'm on the right track here. Again, you won't have a corrected block to be able to do that kind of reference with, so you're just gonna be afraid, which is, you know, what I had to go through as well. But here's that dart that I had pinched out that I need to eliminate. So let's go ahead and cut this out. We will cut this out and we can start to do some slashing and spreading of that green, that new dart up there in the arm side. I don't want 3 darts on my bodice block, so I'm just going to close that dart by swinging it into my waist dart instead. I end up splitting it a little bit of it into this side dart just because this dart up here into the arm side is so large, but I've burned myself before by ignoring that. When I was doing my other muslin, you can go back and read my blog post from 2017, actually, I'll link it below, where I say like, oh, I pinched this dart out, but then it seemed like so much, so I only used half of it. And then I was like, and then I did the next version and went ahead and used the full amount because silly me, I needed it. So I like was too cautious. So this dart up here into the arm side looks large, but I need it. And here I'm just adding some more seam allowance on because I wasn't thinking about seam allowance earlier. Again, we will refine this arm side and shoulder a little bit more as we go through, so I'm not too worried about it right now. But I'm going to draw a line from one of my waist dart legs up to the apex again. That way I can go ahead and cut off this extra from below the waist. Get out. But then cut up that dart leg to the apex. And then I will cut one of these dart legs down to the apex. And then I will go ahead and swing this dart up here closed, because I don't actually want another dart up there. And look at that arm side. What is going on there? Wow. I'm thinking, oh, really? Here, let me fill this in down here. And this is the part where you, if you're on your own and you haven't made a block before, you're thinking, surely that's not right, you know? But trust the process, okay? Trust the process. Here I'm grabbing my muslin thinking, am I for real about that much? This is, so you can see why when I did this the first time, I was like, surely I can't do that much. I'll take it back out. No. I need that dart up there. And this is starting to actually look more like my block. But I'm like, huh, whose darts are bigger, mine or Vogue's at this point? The waist dart is definitely larger on the Vogue pattern now than mine is. But, so I'm thinking, you know, I guess I should have split that fullness between the waist dart and the side dart, because it is such a large extra third dart I'm taking out of the arm side. So I'm thinking to myself, should I split this between the side dart and the waist dart? Probably. When in doubt, it's best to, like, if you have a lot, like over an inch of fullness to be removed or added, it's always best to split it between the two options. So like, for example, when I needed to make the waist smaller, I should have made the dart a little bit smaller and the side seam a little bit smaller instead of putting all of that into the dart. And here I need to take this over an inch of dart space out of the top. I need to split that between the waist dart and the side dart. Like if there's a way to split that fullness, you probably should, as a general rule of thumb. But of course, like, again, I'm no fit expert. I'm just showing you what I would do here, or like, yeah, what I would do. But I may have a fashion degree, but I don't have like a tailoring or fit expertise PhD or anything. There are people who are fit experts out there, and there are people online who are fit experts and can definitely help you along the way with this. This is just how I would go about doing this for myself if there were not a camera watching, you know? But alas, today there is. So hopefully this is helpful to somebody out there to see my messy, I don't know, fit process, I suppose. So I have split that fullness into both of these darts, and I've redrawn my dart legs. Again, I just cut off the excess by folding the dart closed, and then I cut off the extra paper to make sure I have the right shape down here. I didn't have enough paper to even create the right shape. So let's tape a little bit more in here. Fold that dart closed. Now, an indicator to me here that should have been a clue to me that my dart was getting too large down here was that the dart fullness practically reaches the center front, and that's just too big of a dart, man. But that's all right. We will figure out some of this nonsense later. And I'm thinking, let me pull out a French curve. Like, what the heck would this armhole even be? And I'm very concerned about it, but I'm just going to fill it in and trust the process, you know? Because it looks so small and strange, but, you know, I need a strange armhole. So that's just how it is. So I'm just going to curve that in with that little bit of extra, basically just smooth off that curve, and we'll keep it for now, and we're about to find out what it does in our next muslin here in version 2. I'm sure that needs to come down a little bit, but we will discover it together in the next muslin, you know? So I'm just going to go ahead and, again, see what this looks like compared to my pattern. Well, we are getting closer, so clearly I'm going in the right direction. That's promising. Although the Vogue pattern is a little bit bigger, and that's probably because my current block pattern, this black one, again, was drafted, you know, pre-Panini and I don't know, being 30 now. It was drafted when I was like, 25. So I am a little bit differently shaped than I was then. And so technically this Vogue pattern that we're making today fits my current body, whereas my old block technically fits the few years ago me body, which may have been a little bit trimmer, pre-Panini in several cookies, etc. But that's all right. I'm a very squishy and very squishable person. So if I put my body into a corset or into clothes that are a little bit too small, it will easily squish into that dress, no problem. So that's how I get away with having my block be a little bit smaller than I am. It doesn't tend to be a big problem for me. But here I am tracing the back again, so we can have version 2 at the back, because we need to do some work up here on the shoulder. So we have the original version 1 back here. Now we have a tracing of it. And again, I will take my muslin, lay it on top of here, and transfer over the changes I need to make, which is mostly that the shoulder just needs to come away down. So again, I'm just using the indicators I drew onto the muslin to redraw the shoulder completely here on the back of this, like so. So I need to make sure that it will match up with our new version 2 front pattern. And you can see I'm already kind of just ignoring that dart even exists. Yeah, you know. And here I'm taking, again, the muslin to make sure that the front shoulder and the back shoulder will match up. These are the kind of, important things. like so. Needs to be somewhere in here. And I'll just redraw this arm side, curve that back into here. Again, this dart back here is so tall. I think my block, the dart could be a little bit taller, and this Vogue block, the dart could be a little bit shorter. They need to, meet in the middle a little bit here. But again, here's version 2 of the back. I am again going to cut this on the fold, and we're going to make version 2 of the muslin here the same way. And again, we can see, compared to my block pattern, how we're starting to match up. Things are looking a lot closer here. Height-wise, we're getting a lot better, so that's useful. My shoulder's a little bit shorter on my pattern, and the neckline on my pattern is a little bit low, so technically this Vogue pattern is doing better there for me. But here we are with version 2. Let's go ahead and make another muslin. I'll put version 1 aside, and I will make a version 2. Going through a lot of muslin here in the studio today. Ooh. And once again, I'm going to draw on my darts and any other relevant information I feel I may need onto the muslin itself. This is not supposed to be a pretty finished garment. This is a working tool, basically, that we're using to try and perfect our fit as much as possible. Now, speaking of perfect fit, especially all on your own, and especially if you're not like a tailoring expert, you're not going to achieve absolute perfect fit probably on your own, unless you do 12 versions. But let's say you want to keep it like 10 versions or under. Probably you're not going to achieve absolute perfect fit. And I wouldn't say that my clothes that I make here are absolutely perfectly fitting. I wouldn't say my block fits me absolutely perfectly, especially again, since it is a few years old and bodies change. So sometimes I've had comments on my videos before saying like, "Ooh, this certain garment doesn't fit you very well." And I'll say to myself, well, that's because I made it in 2015. So yeah, my body has changed since 2015. So the garments that I have still in my closet from then don't fit as well as ones I've made last year. But that's the nature of, again, bodies, they change. But you're probably not going to be able to achieve absolutely perfect fit, but getting quite close, you have to, at some point you have to call it and be like, hey, we're close enough. And then just start working from there. But there are a lot of little things that you can fix, again, by Googling them, by looking through the kind of booklets like this pattern comes with. A lot of major issues can be solved. But when it starts getting down to like, ooh, would I like the waist to be a tiny bit smaller? Like, oh wow. Or like, could the shoulder seam... I mean, you can get pretty close, but I think trying to go for perfection is always going to be like, lead to sadness and is a false goal, Perfect is impossible. So getting quite close is going to have to be good enough. You can see here, I'm drawing on the 1/2 inch seam allowance, by the way, so I can pin this exactly along the 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm pretty good at eyeballing it, so on some seams I do and some seams I don't, but I'm just pinning this closed. Once again, just pinning it so that it's fully adjustable as well. And here's version 2. Let's go ahead and try this on. All right, so here's version 2 of our Vogue pattern. The shoulder's looking much better, but the neckline is now too low, actually. And this whole area is a lot smoother and flatter because, of course, we took that whole dart out of it, and that seems to have worked quite well. And that funny tiny little armhole works quite well for me. So I need to lower it a little bit. You can see if you look right in my armpit, under my arm, I need to lower this a little bit at the arm side. And also my, I'm trying to point out here that my side seam is pointed forwards. It's like angled, so I need to fix that a little bit. But most of the top of this is laying quite smooth and flat. I need to bring this neckline up a little bit, just because if you imagine, if I sewed it facing onto this, it would take away another 1/2 inch. So I need to come up about a 1/2 inch or more along the sides here, and then up along the neckline. The shoulder seam also is sitting very far forward. It's up to you to decide where the center of your shoulder is and where the center of your side seam is. But my side seam here is pointing a little bit forward, so I need to take a wedge of fullness out of the back pattern, actually, to correct that, and then fix my shoulder seam a little bit as well. But we're getting somewhere. Also, there's this extra fullness here in this dart. I think this is from having this dart be too big. I needed to take the fullness out of the side seam instead of just the dart here. And again, more footage that I'm so glad will be on the internet for forever. But that's okay. My highlighter looks great though, Flexitarian from ColourPop. But I should have split some of that into the side seam is what I'm trying to think out loud here. But the rest of this is fitting quite well for version 2 out of the back here. It definitely was fitting better than my version 2 doing this from a self-drafted sloper. So I'm quite impressed with this Vogue pattern, really. It's not bad as a starting point, that's for sure. But we can go ahead and start working on version 3 now. And here we are. Once again, I have my muslin. I'm going to start looking. So here it looks like I need to bring this down about 3/4 of an inch under the arm, and I need to move my shoulder seam 3/8 of an inch backwards towards the back of my pattern from the front. So I need to take off 3/8 of an inch from my back pattern and add on 3/8 of an inch to my front pattern at the shoulder seam. So that's what I'm thinking about here. And I've already taped some pattern paper onto version 2 here. Now I know I just went over talking about how you need to trace a new copy every time. And here I'm doing that thing where I do as I say, not as I do, because here I am about to just modify version 2 here. You should trace a new copy of version 2 and turn it into version 3, okay? The reason I just went on and on about it is because this is the wrong thing to do, but I just trust myself after years, okay? If you're newer to this, again, do as I say, not as I do. So here I'm just taking that 1/2 inch, a little over 1/2 inch off the underarm here, and then again I need to remove a wedge from the top of this so that my side seam will sit more straight, like up and down along my side as opposed to angled towards the front. So that's modifications I made to the back here. And then here on the front, again, I need to add that 3/8 of an inch back in somewhere because the shoulder was fitting fine. It just was, the seam was too far forward. So by adding this 3/8 of an inch onto the front and taking it off the back, I've moved the seam essentially 3/8 of an inch towards the back. And again, I need to come up back towards the neck a little bit more and raise the neckline a little bit here in the front. So I've done that as well. And then I need to take off, again, this 1/2 inch from under the arm. So go ahead and do so here. Like so. Small, subtle changes even at this point. Even only on version 3 here. But that again is down to both the Vogue pattern being, well done, and then also my body being not crazy far away from the standard, which is nice. And look how the back is really starting to look like my block now with those changes. It's really getting quite similar here. Now the difference here is my block pattern, the black one, has seam allowance down the center back, and this pattern doesn't. So technically this new Vogue pattern is still 3/4 of an inch, I think is what seam allowance I have on this block pattern. It's still bigger than my black one, but that again is because I am bigger than the black pattern is now. So technically this Vogue pattern is fitting me a little bit nicer, but I was just measuring to see how much of that actually is taken up in the dart too, because the Vogue pattern dart is a little bit bigger. And I think it's at least, is it like a full inch? It's like a 1/2 inch or more is being eaten away by the dart. So really this is only like a 1/4 inch of difference in fit, like down here at the actual side seam. So the width of the Vogue pattern and the width of my pattern are pretty similar once you factor in the difference in the dart. So just referencing, again, you won't be able to reference if you don't have a block pattern that you like, but I can cheat. And here on the front, again, we're getting closer. Again, up here we still have some differences going on. And again, you can see this dart down here is now suddenly a lot bigger than my dart. So again, I was like, what if I measure the darts on my pattern and measure the darts in the Vogue pattern and see how much larger the Vogue pattern darts are? And the answer is at least a little bit too much. So, but again, this is kind of subtle nuances of the fit that involve doing 7 versions of a pattern to get it perfect. You can go back and forth, and maybe the first time you'll take a 1/4 of an inch out, and really you needed a 1/2 inch, and so you do the next version, you take the 1/2, and you just go back and forth on these things until you figure out exactly where it needs to be. If you have a muslin, if you have like the first muslin that you make from this, and you have a fitting buddy with you, a lot of this can be done within 1 round if you have someone else with you. It's just the trying to do things, pin things on yourself, mark things on yourself while you're bending around doing that, and second guessing yourself as well. That really creates 2 or 3 of the muslin, 2 or 3 of the versions of this whole process is because of not having a fitting buddy. But doesn't mean it can't be done. You can do it alone. I did it alone, and you can as well. But now we have version 3 here, version 2 and 3. I've done a couple of fixes. I didn't really fix the darts on this round. I just thought about it. Should have just done it. I was like, are these darts too big? Probably. And then I just didn't fix them. So that's nice of me. But again, here we have version 3. And this time I actually did go ahead and sew the darts, because I want to get a real good look at what they look like when they're sewn this time. Because if I'm having a little bit of dart trouble, I want to be able to see it plainly not because things are pinned anymore. Like if I'm going to fine tune the darts, that's when I start sewing them. When I'm just getting the general idea, I find it's fine to just pin them. But now that I need to get into the nitty gritty of them, I'm going to sew those darts in. But I'm just going to pin the side seams and shoulder seams again, just so I can get in and out of this easily. And it's fast that way. So again, let's go pin this on. We have version 3 here. And really, we are getting quite close now. I mean, for version 3 out of the bag, this is not looking too bad at all, especially up here in the shoulder. We still have this extra room here in this dart, so obviously this dart is not perfect. Must fix this. I'm wearing the Bali flower and a 1960s slip here, by the way, for those wondering what the undergarment situation is. The side seam is sitting a little bit better, but that dart fullness definitely needs to move over into the side seam. The underarm is sitting pretty dang well, I have to say. It's about an inch, a half inch, too long from my shoulder, which is perfect because that means when I set a sleeve into it, it will be in the right place. The back is looking okay, but we're getting somewhere here, For version 3, right out of the package, this is fitting quite well, I would say. I just need to make some adjustments to this dart situation here. But like, this is pretty serviceable. If I made a dress out of this, it wouldn't look bad. It would fit pretty well. But here's version 3, like so. All right, so let's trace another copy of version 3 here. Version 2 and 3. So let's trace a new copy of version 3 and try and narrow this dart in and bring it in a little bit. So I'll show you what I would do to do that. So here's version 4. Just traced again, and you can see here I've drawn in red the new dart lines that I want. So I'm bringing the dart in 3/8 of an inch on either side. Those of you who remember earlier, I brought this out the 3 inches, 3/8 of an inch. Clearly that was too much. So I'm bringing it back in, and I'm going to take that 6/8 of an inch off the side seam instead over here. So I marked that, and then I went ahead and folded this dart closed and then tapered it up into the armhole. So I didn't want to take that out all the way along the side seam because I only need that difference at the waist. So I just took that out of the side seam here instead. So hopefully that would make this dart start to fit a little bit better. And I can refine that even more and refine the side seam a little bit more too. But everything is starting to fit quite well here, and we're reaching the point now where the fit differences are going to be small enough that it would be hard to see on camera. I'm just redrawing my dart legs in with the new size of the dart, by the way. So I'm not going to make another muslin out of this and show you what this would look like version 4, just because we're going to start to get into things that are going to be kind of hard to pick up on camera anyhow. We're really in range now, and starting to get into like the nitty gritty of fitting this. So it's starting to look quite not too dissimilar from my block pattern that I drafted from measurements and did 7 rounds of. So this version 4 here should be pretty close. So, we can start doing small little fixes. Version 5, 6, 7. It's not going to be able to be picked up on camera very much. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you what my finished block pattern that I use here all in the time. I'm going to show you like as a reference you can reference the rest of this video, what each muslin looks like, what my current finished block muslin looks like when I try it on. So I cut one of this black pattern out to show you, were I to keep doing version 4, 5, 6 of the Vogue pattern, what I would be trying to achieve, which is the fit that I have on this black one. But once you are happy with your block patterns, I always recommend tracing the finished final version onto poster board. Here's some more poster board examples of the pencil skirt pattern, for example. But that's what this is. It's just black poster board, and then I transfer the markings onto it in white gel pen, just to have like a dark mode block pattern. But a lot of people ask what this paper is. It's just poster board from the grocery store or from Walgreens. You use like thick manila folder paper in fashion school, but of course I don't have that on roll here. So I just trace it out of poster board and it works just fine. So I can trace new copies of this all the time, which is what you see me do in a lot of my sewing videos. But here is my current block pattern that you see me use all the time, not the Vogue one. This is the, Closet Historian block, I suppose. My block that I use all the time. You can see the side seam is quite, at my side. But this does look quite tight. It's fitting almost like a sloper. It's like a second skin. It's very tight on me. And that is because this block is probably a little bit too small for me right now. I'm a little bit bloated this week. I'm a little bit larger because of panini times and not moving around much. So this block is probably a little bit small on me, but that's kind of how I like my clothes to fit. And that's the thing about a block. You can build in any extra ease you want or negative ease. So for me right now, my block probably has about a 1/2 inch of negative ease all around. I'm about a 1/2 inch size larger than my block is anymore, but I actually like my clothes to fit quite closely, so that works for me. So if you want to make modifications to your block as you go along through this fitting process and make it either a little bit larger than you quote-unquote need, or a little bit smaller than you quote-unquote need, you can. Fitting your block isn't about achieving a perfect fit in the eyes of like a tailor. It's about achieving the perfect fit in your own estimations. How do you want your clothes to fit? You get to decide. So that is how I would go about taking a commercial fitting shell pattern and using it to make a basic block that I could then use for additional pattern drafting for other designs to build an entire vintage-inspired wardrobe, as I have done over the last decade here in my own studio. I hope this was at least a little bit illuminating on how this process can come together and can provide a workable block for you. I know that a lot of people ask about how to make a block as if I'm somehow like the guardian of these things, like as if I'm the only one who can share this knowledge with you. There are many ways to get a block pattern, and this is just one of them, and hopefully it will work for some of you. I promise I am not the deity guardian of pattern drafting. It is available to all, and I am simply one practitioner. But thank you as always for watching this video today, and I'll be back here with more vintage fashion and sewing real soon. Bye!